I certainly want to start with a shout out and a commendation to your Executive Director, Steve Aquario, and all of the NYSAC staff. They do an incredible job for you each and every day. Steve is an incredible presence here in the state capitol. He is your voice. He is your advocate. Nobody does it better. Give Steve and the NYSAC team a round of applause for what they do. I didn't ask you, Steve. It looks like a record turnout, I think, right? I mean, it's overflowing, and given all the challenges out there, it's so important that you take the time to participate in this conference. You're all very special, and you're all very important, but I certainly was very pleased to see my home county executive here from Nassau County, Laura Curran. Wonderful to be with Laura always. We were together last night, and she was referred to as the Mother Teresa of Nassau County, and I think that's a pretty good label for any county exec to have. Now, they may not be Mother Teresa's, but I also want to acknowledge that County Executive Mark Polenkars is here, and Ryan McMahon is here. Adam Bello, our new Monroe County Executive, is here. And I have to give a special acknowledgement to Mark Molinaro, our Dutchess County Executive, because if I don't give a special acknowledgement to Mark Molinaro, our Dutchess County Executive, and acknowledge publicly that we're friends, I'd be in a lot of trouble with them. But give all our county execs a round of applause for being here and participating. Congratulations to all the newly elected officials and also to all of you who are appointed county officials. However you got here, in whatever your respective role at the county level, we certainly appreciate what you are doing back home, and just as important, supporting the NYSAC agenda by being here in Albany at a very important time of year. All of you are truly on the front lines of government, and that's why, while you're doing your work back home, it's important that you continue to support Steve and NYSAC because they are advocating for you here in the state capitol. What we've tried to do in the State Comptroller's Office is to partner with you, to provide you support and assistance. Many of you know about our local government leadership institutes, our Academy for New York State local officials, our audits, research reports, the technical assistance that we provide. We are doing everything we can to expand our training opportunities to an even larger audience. You know, many of you have taken advantage of our webinars and our tutorials, and obviously we like to be available for in-person events as well. Just to give you a context, last year alone, we conducted 120 training sessions for nearly 8,000 local officials and staff, certainly including county officials. We also released more than 350 audits of local government, school districts, and local public authorities. Many of you follow our work with our annual report on local governments. We're going to be releasing that later this week. It's full of very important and useful information for you on the key factors that drive local government finance. Last year, as part of that report, we unveiled a new interactive tool on our website which allows you to easily drill down to the individual local government level and examine revenue, expenditure, and debt trends. We're going to continue to do all that we can to build partnerships with you. We want to help you serve your constituents and your residents. And we certainly always look forward to your input. So Steve, whatever feedback you get about what else we could do, we want to hear it and we want to work with you. Staff members who are here, who you should know, if you don't know already, our Deputy Comptroller for Local Government School District Accountability, a graduate of county government, the former elected county controller from Ulster County, Elliot Auerbach, is right here. You should wave for Elliot. I just noticed he looks a lot like Steve Aquario, but this is Elliot Auerbach right here. And our Assistant Controller, who does so much of the important research work that drives our efforts in the local government division, Tracy Hitchin-Boyd is here too. Tracy, give a wave. Many of you have spoken to Tracy. Feel free to get their cards and be in touch with them for any follow-up, or obviously be in touch with me. I've already gotten a few requests that I've got in my pocket here that we're going to go back to the office and follow up on. What I'd like to do in the time that I have is give you some updates on our perspective on where our state's economy is at, certainly some preliminary views on the state budget. I know you've all been talking about that, and just talk about some of the challenges that we see from our vantage point that's affecting local government these days. In terms of the state economy, we continue to see overall Statewide numbers, continued progress, going back to the beginning of the winter, unemployment 4%, average unemployment rate for the first 11 months of 2019. We don't have all the final numbers. Less than 2018 in all 57 counties outside of New York City. So in terms of job creation, we continue to see statewide some very positive numbers there. From the end of the Great Recession, we have added 1.2 million jobs statewide. Only California, Texas, and Florida have added more than we have. The challenge, of course, is we're a big state, and we have many different regions. And when you drill down on those numbers on a regional basis, that's really where you see a mixed picture. So since 2009, more than 90% of the jobs that we've added have been created in the downstate counties. So we're talking about the 5 boroughs of New York City, Long Island, and the lower Hudson Valley. You know, those of you who are from particularly the southern tier, the North Country, Central New York, Mohawk Valley, not as rosy a picture. And that's really the continued challenge that we face. Continuing that trend, for last year we gained 154,000 jobs statewide. Again, 80% of them just in the 5 boroughs of New York City. And when you look over the course of the job picture, since the depths of the Great Recession, we've lost about 70,000 public sector jobs. That's been a little bit of a drag on that, on those employment numbers. So state sales tax collections, obviously sales tax, a very important revenue source for you at the county level, a very important revenue source. It's your largest revenue source, represents $8 billion in county revenues. We track those numbers, and later this week, I think, or early next week? Later this week, or hold me to later this week. We're going to put out our sales tax report. I'll give you a little preview. We're finalizing the numbers, but these numbers I think will hold up between now and the end of the week. In 2019, local sales tax collections in our state rose 4.7%. That's the 4th consecutive year that growth in collections has strengthened. Every region's annual sales tax collections increased in 2019 over 2018. The three regions outside of New York City with the strongest annual growth for 2019 were the Mid-Hudson region at 7.4%, Capital District at 4.3%, and Finger Lakes at 4.1%. And let's hear it for the Finger Lakes right there. So we look at other trends, not just employment and job growth and sales tax. We always keep a close eye on what's happening on Wall Street. Not keeping a close eye today because the markets are down because of what's happening in China. But, you know, generally speaking, we keep a close eye on the securities industry. Why? Because it's a big part of our state's economy, an important revenue generator. For every job created on Wall Street, 2 other jobs are created in the city economy, 1 other job outside of the city but in our state. Once we got through the Great Recession, we've seen profitability in the securities industry every year since 2009. What we saw for the first half of 2019, profits were at $15.1 billion, 11% higher than that same period a year before. We don't yet have the final numbers for the end-of-year results, or, as you know, we will put out probably in the beginning of March our report on the bonus pool for the securities industry. But we do know December closed out as a very strong month, very different than a year ago where December was way down. So it looks like it's going to be another good year for the securities industry. Why is that important to all of us from a statewide perspective? The tax revenue we get from that one sector of the economy generates about 17% of the revenues that come to New York State that supports all the other programs that we care about. So where are we at with the state budget? And I know that's been a big focus of your discussion already. What we're doing in the Comptroller's office is we're working on our detailed analysis of the executive budget proposal. We hope to have that out soon. Again, keep in mind our job is to look at the numbers, make sure that it's in balance, and look at long-term trends. We're not the ones that make the policy choices on where the money goes or how much money is going to be spent. That's the purview of the governor of the legislature, but we like to keep everybody focused on the big picture. So a few early comments, and I think much of this won't be a surprise to you, because I know Steve has already kept you up to date and you've been talking about it. The big challenge this year is dealing with the $6 billion budget gap, and much of that driven by a significant increase in Medicaid spending and costs. Notably, the state's fiscal challenges right now come at a time when our economy is relatively strong. And in fact, tax collections are more than $1 billion above projections for the year. So we still have this challenge, but it's in the context of a relatively strong economic time that's driving revenues. Clearly, the unexpectedly high increase in Medicaid costs over the past year is driving the conversation. As you know, the executive budget outlines some steps meant to deal with this. I know that counties and NYSAC in New York City have very significant questions and concerns about those proposals, as well as other aspects of the budget. The governor, as you also know, has convened a new Medicaid redesign team charged with identifying $2.5 billion in state savings during the coming year. We don't know who all is going to be on the team yet. We do know it's headed by Michael Dowling from Northwell and Dennis Rivera from 1199. Many of you know Michael and Dennis. They've been around for a long time. They are very smart and skilled individuals on issues of health care and on the politics of Albany as well. Don't underestimate their ability to deliver on the governor's promise. I think, Steve, you would agree you've dealt with both of them. But some other factors that I know you're aware of. It's important that everyone keep in mind that the financial plan shows this $2.5 billion figure rising to $3.5 billion within 3 years. And because we are talking about state savings, the overall impact on Medicaid spending, including federal and local funding, will drive that amount even higher. In short, we're talking about a lot of dollars and some very important decisions to be made in a very tight time frame. You know, one of the questions that we have with what the Medicaid redesign team will come up with, will any of that require a legislative action? And depending on when they get it done, you know, April 1st is the budget deadline, will there be time for the legislature to review and have input to those decisions as well? Still a lot of questions. The budget proposal would create a new linkage between the state's assumption of growth in local Medicaid costs and local adherence to the property tax cap. While this proposal appears to reflect the belief that local officials are responsible in some way for rising costs, clearly the ground rules for Medicaid are set at the state and federal levels. The state As an aside, Steve wanted me to point out that when I chaired local governments, I sponsored the NYSAC proposal for the state to assume all the Medicaid costs. That was at a different time, a different era. Molinaro's still applauding. There you go. And I said he was a friend of mine. The state needs to partner with counties and with our New York City to find real, lasting solutions to this problem without harming the more than 6 million New Yorkers enrolled in this program or adding to the local tax burden. Some aspects of the executive's plans for Medicaid are not yet clear. What's the real impact on counties? The financial plan estimates and anticipates $150 million in state budget relief annually based on increased contributions from localities. The impact of the Medicaid proposals may vary significantly from county to county based on differing enrollment and expenditure trends and other factors that may have little to do with decisions made by local officials. When will specific changes be proposed by the Medicaid redesign team? How will beneficiaries be affected? On many of these issues, right now, we have more questions than we have answers. County officials have extensive experience in this area. It is important from my point of view that you have a seat at the table as the decisions are being made in the weeks ahead. I think, Steve, you're going to make sure there's a seat at the table, right? You can do all that you can. Okay. Let me add another point of view on this discussion on Medicaid. If we're serious about driving down Medicaid costs, one area that we need to continue to look at is at waste and fraud, and that's where my office does come into play. Over the last 4 years, our auditors have uncovered billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse in the Medicaid program. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, we released 4 audits of the State Health Department's oversight of Medicaid that identified approximately $790 million in savings from eliminating unnecessary payments, duplicate payments, and collecting rebates from drug makers. Our role in the Comptroller's office is to help lower Medicaid program costs by identifying significant cost savings, revenue enhancements, and helping to identify waste. From our point of view, there's more the health department can be doing to save taxpayer dollars and reducing costs in Medicaid without getting into the other questions that we're all going to be pondering in the next few weeks. I can assure you, We are going to continue our vigilance in this area. We have a dedicated team of auditors that work on Medicaid issues all the time, and we're going to do more as far as reporting on state Medicaid costs so we're not caught by surprise on the trends. Let me just say as a quick aside in the context of this issue, one of the very good things about where New York State is at right now, there's a lot of talk, you know, it's happening on the national level about health care coverage of people that don't have health care coverage. And of course, people without health care coverage, they end up in the system later and sicker and costing more money, and we all have to cover that with our charity pools and so on. We did a report last year that showed that in New York State over the past decade, because of leveraging federal dollars with the Affordable Care Act and the Essential Plan, Child Health Plus, and so on, and more enrollment in the Medicaid program, the number of uninsured in our state went from 10% of the population, cut in half, down to 5%. In the long run, that's actually a very good trend and one that we should be very, very proud of. Now we're having to deal with some of the cost consequences, dealing with the fact that the federal government is winding down some of those subsidies that were there, and depending on what happens in the politics after this year, maybe even more of that to come. But we're going to have to keep a close eye on all this, but it's actually a good thing that we have many more people covered with health care now than we had before. And let's not lose sight of that in our discussion. Other issues to consider as far as the budget and local governments. The proposed budget maintains the aid and incentives to municipalities funding at $656 million. You recall this was an issue last year. This budget continues with holding $59 million in county sales tax collections. That was first established in the budget that we're going through right now, shifting payments to most towns and villages related to the AIM program. $250 million is appropriated for costs related to raising the age of juvenile jurisdiction. I know that's been a big issue to many of you, and Elliot tells me we're going to take a look at how that's impacting our counties. That's on our audit plan for the coming year, and that may be of interest to you. The budget also reappropriates $221 million to match demonstrated shared services savings realized by counties and their local governments. When this initiative in its latest iteration was unveiled, so many of you at the county level rose to the occasion and did the hard work to respond. We put out a procurement report that we released in 2018 that looked at how municipalities can be more efficient, more transparent, and more cooperative in purchasing and procurement. Actually, we announced that out in Suffolk County. I know Deputy County Executive John Kamen is here, and he led that effort for shared services there in Suffolk County. Our report highlighted opportunities for cost savings. We're going to continue to do what we can to highlight best practices in terms of identifying cost savings opportunities. The executive budget also proposes requiring counties to pay the full amount of certain forensic examinations, which is anticipated to cost $5.3 million this year to counties outside of New York City, growing to $10.9 million next year. Counties would also be required to use more of their federal grant monies towards child welfare services. Another proposal would reduce state reimbursement for local child welfare services, having an estimated cost impact to counties outside of the city of $8.1 million this year, $10.8 million in 2021. I think on a positive news front, to help partner with you, the environmental initiatives that are included in the budget can be of help to you for funding your local environmental infrastructure needs. Governor proposed a $3 billion Restore Mother Nature Bond Act that would deal with issues like flood risk, restoring aquatic habitats, protecting floodplains, forests, expanding renewable energy, reducing contamination from agricultural and stormwater runoff. The budget proposes an additional $500 million for projects to protect water quality. You know, it's a big issue in all of our counties across our state, and $300 million for the Environmental Protection Fund. That's an area where I think you could all use more support and help, and I think that Bond Act will be welcome news in that regard. Transportation funding, CHIPS, Marcus-Elli, Pave New York, Bridge New York, that funding remains flat, while a new $20 million appropriation is proposed for upstate transit systems to purchase electric buses. You know much of this. I just wanted to restate it, and I will also restate the obvious. You need to step up your interactions, not just through NYSAC, but what you do locally with your state senators, with your assembly members. You have the relationships. Now is the time to let them know how these budget proposals are going to affect you and your local taxpayers. There is still plenty of time to adjust what's in the executive budget. Make sure your voices will be heard. As we work to meet current and future state budget challenges, we can't ignore what's been happening in Washington as well. Rising deficits at the federal level could lead to cuts for federal programs like health care, education, transportation, other programs that are important to us here in New York. Any cuts from the federal level that would trickle down to us at the state and local level would certainly further exacerbate the imbalance between New York State and Washington. You know, we, on a regular basis, put out our federal fiscal report, kind of a version of what Senator Moynihan did for many, many years. In our most recent report, we found that for every dollar that we send to Washington, we get back 90 cents for every dollar that we send to Washington. The national average is for every dollar sent, the states get back $1.21 for every dollar. We rank 50th out of the 50 states in the balance of payments. We paid over $26 billion more in taxes to the federal government in 2018 than we got back in federal spending. This is one reason why your efforts at the county level to promote the 2020 census count is so very, very important. You know, the federal reimbursement formulas, they're driven by the population counts that are derived from the census. I know many of you are on top of this. All of you need to be on top of it. You have to make sure that everyone in your county is counted. That's going to have an impact on your aid for the future. I hope we can count on you to do that. So there's no doubt that we've got challenges here at the state level. And certainly at the local level, we continue to see issues of fiscal stress. You know, we've got our fiscal stress report that we continue to put out. You know, the property tax cap continues to be a very popular change that we have at the state level. It's permanent now. Growth for local governments is capped at 2% for 2020. For school districts, we just put out that number. They're at 1.18% this year, down a little bit from the 2% figure. I want to support NYSAC's effort to push for more of a public discussion on property taxes, the tax cap, and ways how state and local government can work together to address that burden. We're going to continue our efforts with the fiscal stress monitoring system. As you know, at the end of the day, we find very few of our local governments in fiscal stress. But we think it's very important as an early warning system to keep an eye on the trends. Only 2.4% of local governments were found in stress under our system. What we find, though, overall, counties and cities are more likely to have fiscal stress than our towns and our villages. But use that fiscal stress monitoring system as a roadmap to help you improve your scores and your numbers. A couple of other items, and I'll wrap up. In terms of accountability and transparency, we continue to stay focused on many areas, including spending on preschool, special education, early intervention, and so on. As many of you know, we have stepped up our audit efforts in that area. We found significant mismanagement and abuse. I'm very appreciative, and I will always be, to Steve and to NYSAC for getting more funding for us in the state budget a few years ago. We are auditing every one of the preschool special ed programs across the state. We're up to 150 audits in this regard. We've identified more than $96 million in disallowances for claimed services and, unfortunately, multiple criminal convictions of people running these programs that were ripping off the programs and taxpayers. Thank you, NYSAC, for your support in that regard. And last area, and then I'll wrap up. One or two of you care about our state pension fund, I'm told. So everybody be quiet when I talk about the state pension fund. So I want to update the numbers. Our estimated value at the end of the second quarter was actually at $215 billion. We're finalizing the numbers for as of December 31st. It's going to be in excess of $220 billion. I'm very proud of the fact that our pension fund continues to rank as one of the best managed, best funded state public pension plans in the country. The Pew Research Center every year ranks pension funds. We are one of only 8 out of 50 state plans that is over 90% funded. We are the 4th best funded state plan at 96% funded. Because of that, although we had the rate spike after the Great Recession and after we lost significant dollars, as all investors did, we've been able to decrease the employer contribution rate that we send to you for the ERS system 6 years in a row, For 2020, 2021, the rate will remain flat. For police and fire, it's going to go up 0.9%. So we've had relative stability with our rates since we had that spike after the Great Recession. Now, while the fiscal year is not yet complete, so far, our performance appears to be very strong for 2020. We value the fund as of March 31st. So as I always say, light your candles and go to church or synagogue for me at the end of March that the numbers are good. So you're going to say, Tom, if the numbers are so good, when are our employer contribution rates going to go way down? Well, I want you to keep a couple of things in mind. And Steve was at our advisory council meeting the other day, and he heard much of this. I'll give a short version of it. We've lowered our assumed rate of return from 7% to 6.8%. We recently completed our pension team, our updated asset allocation. We're anticipating a lower return environment. Everybody knows the markets have been stronger and the rally's gone on longer than anybody anticipated. At some point, that's going to correct. We don't know when, and we don't know by how much. But based on the asset allocation and our actuarial assumptions, which are based on the fact that folks are living a lot longer and our payouts are going out for a longer period of time, we're paying out now, just to give you a context, over $1 billion a month in pension benefits to our state and local retirees, and that number is only growing. So the fact that our pension fund is growing while our payments are growing, that's really our challenge. We have plenty of money for the folks who are retired today, and for those of you who are already in the system. It's for the person starting work today that we've got a plan for the future. So my message to you is that even if we get a strong number this year, there's a strong chance we are going to lower our assumed rate of return even further, to be more conservative, to prepare for the long term. My goal, though, is to try to keep the contribution rates that we charge to you as employers as stable as possible. We don't want to have the rates spike up. But I have to have you keep in mind, my overarching goal is to keep the pension fund well funded. That fulfills the obligation to our public retirees, to our members, and the reality is for so many of the states that are in fiscal trouble right now, the genesis of that often is a poorly funded pension plan. So stay tuned, we'll keep you informed on that. Let me just wrap up and say, have confidence overall in our state's economy. Have confidence despite the challenges that are out there. There is the opportunity for you to work to address the proposals in the executive budget proposal that you are concerned about that could impact on our counties. The message is the same as it's been for a while. We all need to be smarter, more efficient. We need to collaborate more often, share ideas. I certainly believe by working together, we could come up with better results. My last item of business. Many of you know that what makes us most popular is when we return taxpayers' lost money, our unclaimed funds program. We always like to point out that there really is money there. Sometimes people don't always believe me. So I'd like to call William Farber from Hamilton County, Chair of the Board of Supervisors, forward. Where are you? Now, you can't do much with this, but we did find $34.17 for you. So you can't buy lunch, but...
You know, you just set me up. You give me a check, then I have to buy with $34.
Now I'd like to call forward our Putnam County Executive, Mary Ellen Odell. Where's Mary Ellen? Where is she? Huh? Is anybody from Putnam here? Oh, there she is. She just said, I hope it's worth a lot. Well, let's just say you're doing better than Farber. You're doing better than Farber. But you're doing real better because I got two checks for you. So for Mary Ellen Odell, the person, $158.63. That's a little better right there.
Thank you so much.
But here's what's more important. Wait, I meant it. I got two.
All right.
So it's all great and fun to show individual checks for people. But I always like to point out there are accounts in there for organizations, including municipalities, including counties. If you don't do it already, have the folks in your business operation periodically check our unclaimed funds website. We make it very easy for you to identify any unclaimed funds and to then claim them and get them back. You know every dollar counts at the county level. So for Putnam County, we found $3,737.18. Now that's real money.
Thank you.
So you can take that
Thank
home.
you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. Always great to be with all of you. Enjoy the rest of the conference and good luck in the budget negotiations.